Hello and welcome to the final walkthrough for A Pocketful of Nuyen. In our opening scene, we start at a bar and we get some backstory to the campaign we're about to play. In A Pocketful of Nuyen, you play as a former corporate security agent, and your former employers contact you again for one final job because they're having some issues with prototypes being sold to their competitors from a mole inside of the corporation. So we begin with talking to one of the bosses who's trying to recruit our player back to the fold, and as you can see, you can decline outright and it ends the entire campaign, but we choose to accept the task and we get some money up front because we're all about that money. And then before going to the next area, upgrade all of our characters' stats. Well, not all the stats. I use what little experience we have to upgrade, I believe, the dodge. Yeah, the dodge skill. And then we go back into it. We travel to the Turing Industries corporate headquarters to talk to the bosses of the Turing Industries. And again, we get some more flavor and we reflect upon what's going on in our situation, in our mission that's going to be ahead of us. And after the transition, we're in the top floor of the corporate headquarters where the bosses are meeting before work. We get some cutscene. We get some waypoints and some dialogue on screen to help us, or to help out the player so they know where to go. And then the player initiates conversations with the three bosses that run Turing Industries. And as we can tell, they don't see eye to eye on many things, and they start having an argument while the player is trying to get more information out of them as to what's going on. And this is also the player's chance to learn more about what the job is, what exactly they need to do. And they have their first branching choices here, which they can go through and get specific information from the bosses on exactly what's going on, as well as a last conversation tree where the player can attempt to acquire more money for the cause, since it's turning out to be more of a handful of a job than what we were led to believe in the first scene. However, the player needs specific skills or talents with many of the branching dialogues, so we're not going to get to see all of them in this walkthrough because the character we're using does not have the required skill set for some of them. As you can see right now, we had etiquette in the top. We could have gotten more money out of them, but instead we had to choose the second option. We still get some money, but not as much as we've originally asked for. Now we've gathered all the information we can from the bosses to start our quest. And the first place we're going to stop at is the security offices, which are downstairs, so we have to use the elevator. Shh, see transition. And the elevator takes us down to the security offices where we meet with the head of security now, who took over for our player after they were fired. And as you can tell, he's not very helpful and he's a bit of a drunk. And the player has the option to just say, forget, be super sarcastic or use knowledge skills, which our player doesn't have, or bribe them. As you can see, I chose to bribe. We lost 10 Nuyen to the bribe, which didn't really yield many results, but we're on the hunt for clues. So we go use the head of security's security terminal because we got access from the bosses to access anything that we want, because they want to get to the bottom of the mole, their corporate mole. Also, if the player has decking skills, which this player does not, they can use the terminal that's over against the far wall to hack into the matrix and discover more information from there. Then after we gather what information we can, a lot of the information has been wiped, blocked. However, we know that the access point was down in the R&D department, so that's going to be our next stop. Before we do that, we need to get some equipment. And ideally, the player would have a pre-made character. However, I chose to use just a preloaded character that already had some weapons with them because they're just a generic slate. So I don't actually choose any weapons here. And choosing to select a character that's already been created doesn't really do much since all the characters start at the same level. It's just I start out with more weapons instead of having to buy them, which are, since we gained money from the bosses in the beginning, is negligible compared to how much the weapons actually cost. So it doesn't affect any of the gameplay. It's just to speed things along, but show you all the different weapon choices so the player can play as any class. All the classes are fit. So if you want to be a samurai, a street samurai I should say, you can use melee weapons, which are down at the bottom, or depending on what other skills you want, you can get rifles, shotguns, pistols, SMGs. Then we head through the locker room where you can see some of the Easter egg posters I put into the game just for fun. We go into the firing range, and the player can have tons of fun shooting the drones and blowing them up because everyone loves explosions. Why not? And once we destroy all of the drones in the firing range, our goals are updated so we can finally head down to Turing Industries. Included this is a fun little tutorial in case players are new and they can figure out how to initiate or survive in combat, because it comes into play heavily later on. Now we take our elevator down to research and development, where we meet some more colorful characters: Sheila, the head of R&D, and Dr. Jonas, the lead scientist and developer of many of the Turing products, because they're leaders in innovative warfare. And Sheila, being managerial position, is very on edge, but we can coax her down, and she leads us to Dr. Jonas because she doesn't have a whole lot of information on who accessed the terminals on the days in question. So we're trying to find clues. The mystery, guys. Hope you enjoy. And we have Dr. Jonas here, and you can be sarcastic or be polite to him. If you're sarcastic, you're met with this response, and he ends the dialogue trees, or the conversation I should say. So you have to try again, trying to pick some other things, because he is one of the few characters that does not respond well to sarcasm or you being a jerk. Some of the other NPCs respond well to you being a jerk versus you being nice. And you can kind of feel it out for each NPC and character based on how you want to play. You always get options, whether you want to be the white knight or be sarcastic or just be a jerk. And then here I go into a side area, and it's indicated by a secondary waypoint to try and lead the player into that room. If they're not really an explorer, you can still have it on screen. And what that does is gives you access to better upgraded armor than what any of the players start out with. And so what you can do is just go straight to the elevator and up to the corporate offices again to talk to secretaries, or you can do that little side area or side quest to get better armor and try not to get eaten by the octopuses down there. Now it's later on in the day because we've been to the security offices and the research and development area. So the secretaries for each of the bosses are in now because we're into the workday. So we get some good information from Jason Kiev's secretary, who we have prior knowledge. The character has prior knowledge of in the story because they used to work here, so they have kind of a relationship. She tells us to talk to the other secretaries because the secretaries know what's going on behind the scenes, since they kind of run the place under the table. And Shepard's secretary is very, very rude. I chose to just end the conversation, which you can't talk to her again once you do that, or you can continue to inquire about things, and she's very rude to you. And then you can also search the trash can, so you get some information about Shepard, and then how he has a drinking problem, and he has a big tab, which in the full campaign you'd be able to investigate further, but in this alpha version we can only investigate Wiley, whose secretary is mysteriously absent today. She's sick, which the secretaries never call in sick, so it's very, very fishy. So we go and investigate. We get his secretary's apartment address, so we go to see Abby. We get kind of low down on what's going on in her apartment before you enter, and so we go and talk to Abby, whose apartment has been wrecked, and we find out why. It's because Wiley has a very hefty outstanding debt to the local mafia who run a casino, and he deferred his debt to his secretary, and so they've come to collect several times. So they've destroyed some of her apartment, and they've roughed her up, as we can see from her character portrait. Then we get a confession out of her, and we get the evidence we need to have some circumstantial evidence for how and why Terrence Wiley is the corporate mole. However, we still need to stop by the Little Gamblino Casino to confirm that he sold the prototypes, or did not sell the prototypes, to the mafia in order to get money to pay them off to settle this debt. So we have a really strong lead here, but we're not 100% sure that Wiley's the corporate mole yet. However, part of the Abby's story is that the mafia is still there, and if we leave, they'll murder her. So I chose to be a nice guy and go and confront the mafiosos that are hiding in her bathroom. They come out to try and ambush our character, and they do some damage, but we successfully defeat all of them. So we'll see in a minute. It's very exciting. Very extreme, intense combat. Which is why we included, that's why I included the shooting range earlier, so you know like how to shoot at enemies. This orc decides to try and run away for some reason after trying to attack us. So I chase him down. And combat ends and we're victorious. So now it's time to go to the Little Gamblino Casino. Try and solidify our suspicion that Terrence Wiley is the corporate mole and selling the prototypes of blueprints to Turing Industries competitors. And then we have our updates to all of our quests and waypoints. Before I talk to the receptionist in the front to gain some more intel and find out what's going on, we have some unspent karma! So we're going to upgrade our SMG skill here. If I can click it. There we go. Because we're going to need it. Coming up soon. The receptionist tells us that Mr. Porkins handles all tabs and customer info, and he's in the back and we can go talk to him, which seems suspiciously easy. That the receptionist just like, yeah, go in the back, it's all good. And we come in here and Porkins is talking to Terrence Wiley. Oh my gosh, what an amazing twist. It almost seems like he's been caught red-handed. And a second ago I picked up a health pack out of the open crate, which a on-screen prompt came up to show that there's an item you can interact with. And I like to pick it up before this, because being the designer behind this, I know a combat's going to happen. If the player does not pick it up before they talk to Porkins and Wiley, They can also use one of their action points in combat to pick it up, or if they're super amazing, Shadowrun returns. Then after they kill everybody here, they can pick it up. Also, when you're talking to Porkins, there's 2 other branching trees that allow you to not initiate into combat with them. One is bribing them off, but you have to have 80,000 Nuyen in order to do that, which we don't have. And the other one is using some smarts in order to offer up robbing Terrence Wiley, because we convince Porkins that since he's a billionaire, he obviously has more money since he sold all the blueprints, and they'd be well worth more than what his debt was. And Porkins agrees to let us go in order to go rob Wiley. However, I didn't have that high of enough skill to do that, and I didn't have any Nuyen for the other option. So what we're left with is engaging in combat, which is super exciting. Who doesn't want to see combat in a walkthrough? And I know it's nerve-wracking and exciting because I'm getting shot and I have half health. But fear not, we will be victorious, boys and girls. Again, it behooves the player to pick up that experimental armor back in the R&D lab. It helps a lot because it comes with an ability where if you use it, your player dodges the first attack of every single round, which I used it in the beginning of that combat because it helps greatly in defeating all the gangsters. And since we defeated everyone in combat, we gain a whole bunch of karma, which is the XP system in Shadowrun Returns. So we can spend it on that. Also, if you use the dialogue trees in order to bypass all the combat, basically completing the objective through cleverness rather than brute strength, you also gain karma points. So players that decide to be more crafty are not left out. So having done those objectives, we gotta head straight to Turing Industries again because we gotta confront Wiley before he skips town. And on the way there, we contact the other 2 bosses who are closer in proximity, so hopefully they get there first to subdue Wiley to make this a little easier. But oh no, they've been captured by Wiley and one of the security guards at Turing Industries that's under Wiley's command, while Wiley is cleaning out the rest of the safe inside of their conference room. But of course, since we're so amazing, we're going to confront Wiley. But seems to not have worked so well because he calls in the rest of the security force that's present in the corporate offices right now because it's after hours. But some of them are still left trying to make sure everything's locked up tight. And our old friend Tavis, who we remember from the armory, doesn't quite buy into the fact that we and the other 2 bosses are robbing everybody. So we have a chance to convince her to help us, which I chose the route where she joins your team. If you choose the first option, which you just straight up just show her the evidence, she is convinced, but she leaves to go contact the police. So it's left up to you and the other 2 bosses to fight off all the security guards and Wiley. The second option, you go a more personal route with her. She joins your party with the other 2 bosses, so you have 4 characters for the final showdown instead of 3. Or if you choose the third option where you're just kind of like, yeah, I'm a criminal, whatever, then she stays with the other security officers and you have to fight against her as well. Personally, I would never do that or play that way. I'm sure there's people out there that would do that. Because, you know, games like Fallout, people choose the negative karma route. So I wanted to give the player lots of options for playing just how they wanted to in this campaign. That was a huge selling point for me. So we have our intense combat at the end of this. We're with the fight for our lives. Yeah. And then for those of you unfamiliar with Shadowrun Returns or most modern strategy games in general, I put 2 of my characters into Overwatch because I knew that guy was coming in the doors. And Overwatch in these types of games just makes it so if an enemy comes within that yellow range, they get shot or shot at. They attempt to shoot him, which luckily our 2 characters are successful. And now we talk to Jason to end out our campaign. He thanks us and gives us our well-deserved payday. Thanks.